the way you were saying it to him, so I can see why he
This
was concerned.
conference will now be
Okay, but thank you
recorded.
for the interpretation. I appreciate
Hey,
it.
so if I don't scream out loud, do I have to raise my hand? Oh, now we're
Raise
on.
your hand, I'm gonna put one of these between
I have
your
to do
eyes.
what? Wait, what was that? Say it again? We on. When does the hand raising start?
We're on.
Especially that
Okay.
gavel goes.
Welcome to our workshop this evening on the housing this evening, and we'll have staff read a introductory piece, I believe.
I'm just going to do roll call.
Okay.
Just put us up here. Councilmember Hagan,
Here.
Councilmember Crumick called in, will be absent from this workshop.
Okay.
Councilmember Bellinger,
Here?
Mayor Pro Tem Swift,
Here?
Mayor Alves.
Here. Okay, thank you for coming this evening. Dominic, you want to read anything besides that? You want to, you have something
No,
prepared?
we could just move right into the workshop. I'm going to go ahead and pull up our PowerPoint here.
Okay.
And so, just a little background. Around this time last year, March and April, we had 2 workshops regarding senior housing. And so some of this PowerPoint is going to revisit a little bit of that information just to get everything back on board, and then we can move forward with what the direction was from the last meeting. So today we're having our senior housing workshop, and the goal of this workshop specifically was to review the past RFP queue for senior housing projects to provide flexibility in the capital and financing requirements. And this was discussed at a few meetings ago at the council level when we brought back that RFP. The revisions that were specifically identified were identifying a maximum acreage offering towards the project, identifying a maximum amount of fee credits the council would be willing to apply towards the project. And then another item that was discussed was requiring selected developer to present a project with renderings to the city's seniors and general public to ensure compatibility with specific housing needs for seniors. And so the financial considerations that were discussed at that meeting and in the staff report from that meeting was that the city has parkland located north of Hogan Ennis Park. We also have a 7-acre parcel outside of city limits, St. John and Catherine. If used or sold for a senior project, the park's impact fund would need to be repaid based on the market value or sales price of the land. And this could be done through an interfund loan from the In Lieu Low Income Housing Development Impact Fund. The city's In Lieu Low Income Housing Impact Fund currently holds a fund balance of just under $900,000, which could provide credits to a developer of a senior project if that project meets the use requirements of increasing or improving housing for low or moderate income households. Any use of the In Lieu Housing Impact Fund would require some type of interfund loan, as the cash in this fund has previously been loaned to another impact fund. And so then we're at the RFP, which I have identified the pages, and I have the document that I can pull up so we can view that, where we're talking page 3, paragraph 2 is on the number of acres, and then we talk about the financial offers, and then any additional areas that may need review. I know we discussed in past meetings, I've talked to a few developers that we had been in contact with regarding this project, and they kind of pointed out some items that may or may not kind of tie their hands and what types of projects they'd be able to propose. And they talked about like the deed restriction age maybe being too hard, rental units and sizes. And then we talked about the addition that we wanted to add, or that was presented, was to add that requirement to present the project with its renderings to the senior community and the general public to ensure its compatibility with our housing needs for seniors. And so a little background on the affordable housing in lieu fee, and I do have our interim finance director, Claire Tyson, on the line if there's any other questions on that finance. And our municipal code has a section regarding affordable housing, which is 17.50, and it outlines the purpose of providing affordable housing in Escalon, consistent with state law and the city's general plan. It includes the minimum requirements for developing affordable housing-based projects. and identifies the availability for collecting fees from developers when they do not provide the required affordable housing. And these fees are accounted for in that affordable housing in lieu housing fund, low-income housing fund. So how can these monies be spent? And so our municipal code states that the money deposited in the housing trust fund, including any accrued interest, shall be expended exclusively for the development of new or substantially rehabilitated dwelling units that are available at an affordable housing cost or an affordable rent to households of very low, lower, and moderate income, and that are subject to the deed restriction requirements set forth in Escalon Municipal Code 17.50070. So examples that have been discussed in the past on how these monies can be spent is to subsidize the construction of new or rehabilitated dwelling units so long as the end result is the production of restricted affordable units. Help pay for the land required for a project so long as the end result is the production of restricted affordable units. Could be used as matching funds for a tax credit affordable housing project. And so then what is low or moderate housing amounts? And this is the chart. This is the most recent one posted, which doesn't appear to be, it was updated back in December. Doesn't appear to have changed any from what was posted last year. The low income is currently estimated at $42,000 a year for a one-person household. Moderate income is currently estimated at $63,000 for a one-person household. And then I have this blank for other considerations of the RFP, which we discussed earlier, other items that you may be wanting to look into. And so that direction that we're looking for from council regarding the RFP would be that maximum acreage to be offered towards the project, providing a maximum amount of fee credits the council would be willing to apply towards the project, which that $900,000 can be used as credit, can be applied as a credit towards projects to cover impact fees and housing costs that the city would charge the developer per unit. And then should the developers be required to present the project with renderings to the city seniors and general public, and then any other flexibilities that we think should be provided in that RFP. And so, let me pull that up here. And I have a lot of documents open here, so. Okay, so this was where we left off. And so if we're going through this project, which this was released back in July, and then we left it out for about 60 days, so it came in September, and we did not receive any proposals. When I did speak to developers, it was due to the lack of flexibility, some misunderstandings, or it not being totally clear what we were asking for, or what limitations there was, or whether the whole park area was available. So there was a lot of things that were kind of up in the air. Although I didn't get a lot of questions on it when it was out. And usually we get people posing questions and we provide an answer out to everybody. I didn't receive any questions on that. So the background is just talking about the project and the location, and what we're looking for process-wise. And then we talk about the property, which we are currently looking at our 18-acre property just north of Hogan Park. It is located outside of city limits, but because it's city property, we can do what we want with that project or with that parcel, not pending any annexation at this point in time. Excuse me. It's currently home to an old orchard, and it has a rental house with tenants. We do know that that property currently has a master plan illustration that's currently set on it, and I'll skip over to that just so we can have a better look. This was approved through a community meeting back in 2016, and so this was essentially what we were looking for, and we did receive grant money to be able to move forward with this illustration. I know it's a little small, but if I zoom in a little closer here, it's along Escalon Road, and then We have our community center, which is existing, and as you're moving forward, right above the Escalon Feed and Supply property is the number 14, which is our future skate park location that we've designated. Some overfill parking. This is a more developed, obviously improved area, and then a lot of area for baseball fields, those type of things. So this section here that we have highlighted is specific to senior housing is a need that the city is willing to put 3 to 5 acres towards the property. And that was what was originally proposed and approved by the council to put into the RFP. So if the right project is presented, it was 3 to 5 acres. The city is open to soliciting up to 5 acres of the 18-acre property for a project and efforts to allow the responder flexibility with project size and to draft a project that meets the city's needs and desires. Dependent upon the project size and its design, the city may seek to negotiate with the developer to construct certain park improvements mentioned previously as a part of the project's development, acceptance, and approval. So at that time, we did discuss, well, maybe if we do 3 to 5 acres and they develop some type of project, maybe in some way, shape, or form, we could move forward with them developing a project and then also finishing out the rest of the acreage with our future park information or plans. Yes.
Okay, let her finish. Are you done?
That portion, we could do one at a time, that's fine.
All right, Vice Mayor Swift.
Question, any movement on this in terms of giving them acreage or deeding them acreage or anything like that? Does that trigger prevailing wage for the project?
In the acreage, Ann?
The size, I don't think the size makes a difference, but if the city is donating the land and subsidizing the project, it's subject to prevailing wage anyway.
Any financial contributing?
Sorry.
Councilman Bellinger.
If we sell it for $1, that's a sale and it's no longer ours, does that get around that?
And it's still.
Whether we sell it, give it in any way, shape, or form, we can't get away from it?
If it's below market, see, if you sell it for fair market value, then you wouldn't need.
Okay, so it does have to be fair market value in one form or another.
Because otherwise it's considered like a subsidy.
Okay.
All right, what I'd like to do this evening is open it up to the audience, and I'd like you to raise your hand to be recognized so we can have some order in these meetings, so we don't have people. And also, I'd like to limit it to 5 minutes maximum to every person. And I'd like you to come up and get what's on your mind off of it, and then have a seat, please, and let the next person have an opportunity. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
May I read Councilmember Crumit's statement?
You certainly may.
Just before we move on to public hearing, we did receive a written statement from Councilmember Crumit, who was unable to make the workshop tonight. Good evening, council, staff, and citizens of Escalon. We find ourselves here at yet another special meeting to consider senior housing in Escalon. I'm happy that this topic is moving forward, albeit slowly. My statement will be brief, as I feel we have discussed this topic at length already and are faced with the same decisions that we should have made long ago. The only question before us tonight is how bad do we want market rate senior housing project to develop in this city? I say market rate because that is really what we want. As we saw with the Irwin Village development, this town has no appetite for subsidized senior housing. The goal is to get senior housing that will accommodate the individuals who wish to downsize from their single-family residence, retire, and stay in this town. This should be our aim, and this is the type of project we must target. We must come to the table with land and money in order for this project to pencil out for potential developers. I am recommending that we offer a maximum of 9 acres of the proposed Hogan Park expansion land as the development site. This would give the developer ample space to design a project and also leave the other 9 acres open for the recreational expansion. This is the land. I am also recommending that we waive all city fees that are normally related to this kind of development. This would include, but is not limited to, a waiving of all connection fees, developer impact fees, and administrative fees, etc. This is the money. We need to bring a better deal to the table in order to achieve our end goal. Remember, the more restrictive we are on the number and type of units, the less chance we have to make this project happen. I would urge the council to consider my proposed recommendations for tonight's discussion. Thank you, Peter Krummick.
Very good. All right, Councilman Hagan.
For Ann, what about lease option to buy options? How does that affect the transfer of land?
Well, if it appears to be that you're subsidizing the project in any way, then it's subject to prevailing wage. So it doesn't matter really what the structure of it is. I guess if it was a lease with an option or a lease purchase that was, again,
Yeah.
market value, that, then that wouldn't trigger prevailing wage.
Okay,
That's, yeah.
thank you.
You have more? Go ahead.
No, that's good.
You're good?
I wanted to just
All right.
clarify that.
Okay. Councilman, before we go out there, is anyone else that'd like to add anything before we go out to the public?
I've got more questions, but,
Well,
so we talk about transferring of money for the value of the acreage, whatever we decide to use, to give that to the Park Foundation, the Park Foundation say, do we know what the current market value is of an acre of dirt out there for this, and how much that would cost the city, and how we would manage that?
Not currently, no.
Okay.
That's something that we could roughly put together. I did speak with a potential developer last week regarding land and money, and what they were explaining to me was that vacant land is actually coming in at less value than non-vacant land. And so I'm unsure where that's coming from, but with this market inflation, because it lacks utilities and those type of things that have gone unchanged, that the pricing of vacant land is less than it was before. But I'm not absolutely sure, and I know that us as our small city of Escalon have different circumstances compared to other cities when it comes to home values and things like that. And so we could definitely try to narrow that in. I can contact somebody and get that information.
And if we did that, you'd mentioned that the payment from the in lieu of fees is what's gonna be paying back the loan to cover the park fund on that? I was curious where that money is coming from. I saw something about in the other slideshow, about where the money would come to pay for that.
I might refer over to Claire on that, just to make sure you get completely accurate information. Claire, would you be able to answer that, please?
I can turn it off.
Yes, so if your project is not a low or mod project, you would be looking at going from one of the other funds that are impact funds. So the transportation one, or something that still holds a balance. It would limit your ability to use those funds for other projects for a period of time, but it's something you could look at.
Well, I guess my concern is if we make this transaction happen and we move 5 to 9 acres, whatever the number may be, and there's X value to that property, and then we also drain the in lieu of fund of $800,000-900,000, we're not exactly building like crazy in this town, where are the funds gonna come to pay back the park fund for that land that exchanged from one group to another is my question.
Good question.
Because you mentioned it was gonna come from the in lieu of fees, if we drain
If
that
property
account.
were sold,
What's that?
so if the property, if the property were sold, then that sales price would go back to the park fund.
Correct.
If, it sounds like if you are interested in a market rate project, the in lieu funds do not become available, right?
Okay.
So it depends on what kind of a project you're bringing in.
Go ahead.
Does that also apply to a hybridized project? So if you had, X number of fair market, and then some of it is also attainable or in that group?
Yes, then you could use the in lieu funds for that.
That portion that meets that
That,
Standard.
statement, yeah.
Standard, okay. All right.
So the developer has a formula for if they did a hybrid project, how many units they would need to get max value out of the credits, shall we say, for the low income, and then with the attainable and the market rate, they would be able to maximize that. They know those numbers already then.
They would need to calculate it out with like today's construction costs and items, and so that would be a part of this RFP. When we were working with the owners of Heritage House, that was basically what they did. They had created a pro forma, an active pro forma, and they were taking into consideration monies we had available, any tax credits if they were given the tax credits, and essentially those numbers were telling them how many they could do at, how many they would need to do at affordable to be able to receive that tax credit base from the state and federal government, how many they would need to have at market rate to help offset the subsidizing that would need to take place for those attainable units. And so they had worked it out at that point. They were looking at about 71 units, but they also wanted to apply to the state and federal government for those tax credit programs and essentially try to achieve 40 to 50 housing authority vouchers for the project as well.
So they want to build 71 units with 40 to how many? The vouchers are for
and
the
they-
low income?
Vouchers are for what we talked about and under the 42,000
Okay, so that's
annually
considered
for one
like
person.
low.
That's considered the low,
Would
yeah.
that be considered Section 8?
Section 8 is a different, it's my understanding Section 8's a different program because that's the one that's based more for families. And so this one is just called a voucher-based program, and because it would have been deed restricted for seniors, it's just a voucher-based program.
On your income,
Deed
right?
restricted senior so basically your stated income, yeah.
Okay.
So it'd be the same program that they currently have at Heritage House that they've had for decades is what they're looking to do if they were the developer at the.
So
Right
the
there,
so
right
the
there.
program that Heritage House is on, it's my understanding that when it's been explained to me, it's a HUD 202, which that program is no longer offered. They get to continue with that program because that was originally what were constructed on, and they just keep revising it to keep the project going. But since then, they've changed the programs and created a voucher-based program. So although Heritage House isn't under the voucher-based program, because they're open to their income-based in accordance with the state's requirements, because that's a part of their construction was that they follow those programs, they're open to vouchers, so they will take people on vouchers if they meet those income requirements and the age restriction, and have availability, of course.
You finished now, Mr. Bellinger? All right, Mr.
Can I
Swift.
ask- I'm sorry, but Mr. Bellinger, did you ask a question about if the city provided land
Yes,
to, let's say if the city donated land to the
Right.
developer, did you ask a question about how that money, the value of that?
yeah. How does the value of that money get repaid to the park fund?
I don't,
I haven't heard that actually
I'm not aware
technically.
that it does need to be paid back. Claire, do you? I don't understand, and I think the city owns that land, they could just donate it. I don't know why it would have to be paid
We've
back.
never been told that. We've always been told if we sold it, we had to replenish it. That's what we've always been told.
You'd have to replenish the park fund?
The money has to go back into the park fund, just like the 7 acres out there. If we sold that, that money went into the park fund as well. Because the money that was purchased with came from those funds. That's why we had to recycle back into it.
Impact fees.
Right, correct. Well, if we know any different, maybe you could tell us later.
Well, I will look at that.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I don't see a mechanism to pay it back, but it has to come in back from the quote-unquote in lieu of funds, and we've seen how that fund has been fairly stagnant without the movement of development, and we don't move that very fast in Escalon. So-
The in lieu funds.
Yeah,
And
and-
that money really does need to be spent, because otherwise, I mean, it's supposed to be spent or budgeted within 5 years of collection. And if it's not, I mean, theoretically, the city could be forced to refund that money under the Mitigation Fee Act. I mean, some cities have actually had to do that. They've collected fees and just sat on them for years and years. And, and the city was sued and had to refund it.
Yeah, because that might impact how we move the property. If it's worth $10,000 an acre, then you take it out of the in lieu of before we give the rest to a developer and everybody's square then,
Yep.
if it's not valued at a very high rate. So I was
Okay.
curious what
I
it was
see
worth.
Claire's unmuted herself. She might have some additional information.
Well, let's have it.
Do you have anything, Claire?
My understanding is that the plan for that in lieu funds was the senior project.
Well, what particular senior project are we talking?
This-
Go ahead, Councilman.
This what senior project?
Councilman Swift, go ahead.
So when the RFP was developed, it was developed with the low income or a affordable concept. And in doing so, it made those in lieu funds available for that project. That was my
Even
understanding.
for moderate income.
Yeah,
Moderate income,
right.
as you saw, was 63,000 for one person.
Correct.
Go ahead.
But Claire, to Ann's point, and in a way, Councilmember Bellinger's point too, is there any way to get, if that property is donated, okay, is there any, does it have to show somewhere on that it's been taken out of a developer impact fund some way, somehow, somewhere, or can we just donate it?
I'm not certain. I'm going to have to do a little bit of research with our external auditors to find out how we would record that in an impact
Okay.
fund. I don't want to give the
A lot of
wrong.
ambiguities. There's a lot of uncertainty here. I mean, we can move forward, but there's a lot of stuff that we don't really know yet.
Well, I mean, ultimately, it all depends on how badly do we want this. I mean,
Well, I understand
you know.
one as bad as we want, but we can't break the law. That's the bottom line.
No, we can't break the law. So I think worst case scenario, we just have a gigantic hole in a fund that, to Councilman Bellinger's point, there really isn't any good funding mechanism to pay back.
Well,
there is or not.
except that maybe the transportation fund, or you could do
Possibly.
an inter-fund loan. I think.
What I'm not clear on is, like I said, in the past, we've always been told that when you sold recreational land, you had to reimburse the recreational department. That's what I've always been told that.
Because the money was collected.
Yeah,
Market.
and that's been on for years and years and years.
Yeah, okay. That's probably true. That's probably.
It makes sense. So if we did actually sell the property,
That's
go ahead.
true. You're absolutely correct, that any revenue you gain from it goes back into the fund.
There you go. Okay, good to know. Now, are there any other questions on staff here before we go out to the, go ahead.
She said any revenue you gain from it. What if we gain no revenue from
Well,
it?
the money I think she's referring to is the money the money from the sale is the revenue she's referring to.
Right, but if we sell it for zero
You can't.
or $1.
You can't.
You know,
She just said we couldn't.
then it has to be fair market, it has to
That's
sell fair
correct.
market, okay.
Correct. Okay.
Okay, so the other point though, if we're talking about an interfund loan to realize the monies from the in lieu fund, and then if we're also talking about, borrowing money from one fund to another because we've sold the land that we don't have, there's only one fund that really has the money to even come close to that, and that's the transportation fund. I don't know if there's enough in there to do both.
We'd have to look at that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, any more questions before we move out to the public?
Oh, I'm sure I'll come up with more, but not right now.
I'm sorry?
Maybe later.
Maybe later. Okay.
One last question.
Councilman Hagan, go ahead.
With the current size of the community center now, is that about 7 acres, or is that what it's at right now?
I'm not sure what the total size is there. I could look it up really quick while you guys are talking. I'll pull it up right now and I can let you know.
You can wait. Go ahead.
One sec here.
All good questions.
Logging into our database so I could pull up the address.
And I have a question for you. If we had somebody in the community that had land that would be willing to build the project like we're trying to do, if we were to reduce our fees, is that considered the trigger for the prevailing wage? It
Yeah.
is as well. Is it possible you think we could appeal to the state of California and ask them for a one-time waiver?
Could always try.
You can always try. We're a small community, maybe they'd entertain it.
Do we have enough in lieu of fees to cover all of our expenses or all of our fees that we would have if we connected to a project like that? Just use those fees to cover the internal fees, and
I don't know how that's gonna work.
that keeps you away from prevailing if you had the land from somewhere else.
You know, but you're still gifting.
Number 2.
In lieu of fees aren't gifting, though. That's for
If you're
a
paying-
specified project, I would think.
But it's still money from the city into the project. Anytime you commingle that money, that triggers it. Okay, did you have?
10.2 acres. And
10.2
that's
acres?
current Hogan Park with the community center.
10.2 acres, okay, good enough. All right, you guys ready to go out? Okay, we're gonna open it up to the public. I'd just like you to raise your hand so I can call you. Mr. Fox, go right ahead. Come up to the counter and give us what you have.
Danny Fox, 1510 Adriana. In regards to paying back the recreation fund, I think when the 7 or 6.7 acres was purchased, it was purchased for a park. That money came out of the Parks and Recreation Fund. That's why you keep hearing, and it is, that if it's sold, it goes back in there. Regarding Hogan Ennis Park, the city had to pay back $300,000 on the money they put out for the 31 acres for the regional park. So in order to get that over to the Hogan Park, they paid back the $300,000 to the state. There was no money taken out of the Parks and Recreation Fund on the transition or the deal between 31 acres on Ulray. That was switched, and the buyer paid an extra amount of money to purchase that 18 or 19 acres. So I don't think any money that was out there did not come from the Parks and Recreation Fund. It came through a deal of a trade, 31 plus 19, in addition to some extra dollars. So whatever property is sold there, it's my understanding that that doesn't have to be paid back to the Parks and Recreation.
I don't know. I know that money came by way of, I think it was a grant or a loan or something. There was money that we got originally for the regional park.
That's
And that
all.
regional park money is what you're referring to. And when we decided not to do the regional park, the money was then had to be paid back, a balance of it, that we weren't covering on the property swap. That's what happened. Nick before about that.
Right, but the city had to pay back the state
That's correct.
the $300,000.
I don't remember how much
Yeah,
it was, but we did have to pay
$300,000
him back.
because the county, they donated $200,000 and the county waived that.
That could be.
Anyway, I think that the property, if you look into it, has nothing to do with taking money out of the Parks and Recreation Fund and having to put that money back in. I think it's clean, separate.
All right. Mr. Stroman.
Good evening, council, city attorney, and city manager. So I write RFPs for my professional career many, many times a year, and I just wanted to share some ideas. First of all, Dominique, did you talk to any developers after the last council meeting to see what we might be able to do to open up the RFP more?
I did. So I reached out to all of the developers that we have spoken to in some way, shape, or form regarding senior housing, as well as the developers that are either looking to do a project in town or were working on a project in the last few years. I forwarded them over the information. The ones that responded back to me, I sent them the copy of the RFP and asked for feedback. Most of the feedback I had received was given at the last meeting, where there were some concerns with like the age restriction of 67 and up, a little bit of not being, not being totally clear what part of the park they could use for the project. Was it all open, or were they supposed to go to a certain portion and whatnot? So we could definitely try to be more clear in that fashion. But in talking to all of them, some of them just asked, has anything changed since the last time you guys met? Which we haven't really done anything since the last workshop that we had, and since the RFP came in with no RFPs, with no proposals, besides talking with RHF. And so it seemed like at that time, when we didn't have any proposals and moving forward, that RHF was our best bet. One, that they were already in town and already had a successful project in town, were very experienced in it, and then also maintain ownership and management of all of the properties that they built. And so we worked with them. And then as we move forward with other projects, and we had Irwin Village moving forward, that was when I reached back out to them and asked them about, is there a way to do the project without the tax credits, a way to move forward without using the voucher program, where we would be able to fund it more directly. And at that point is when they had mentioned, no, like that our projects, that defeats our mission. Our projects all go to the state. We get tax credits. That's how we do things. So that's where we've left off.
So, Mr. Mayor, my 5 minutes begin now?
Hey, what now, please?
Can I begin? Can my 5 minutes start now?
Fine, whatever.
Okay. So my suggestion would be to write the RFP on a not to exceed amount. Because as Councilman Crumick indicated, if you write it on a not to exceed, the developers will tell you exactly what they need. So as city council, you can say, we're willing to give up to, not to exceed 9 acres, not to exceed 10 acres. And they come back and say, we could do it for 7 acres. Somebody else says we can do it for 6 acres. And then that is part of the evaluation process by city council to understand, okay, what's the best value? Because when you write an RFP, that's how you evaluate it. You evaluate it on best value. Because right now you're trying to put constraints on a program that, without input from developers, you just don't know. Let the developer tell you that, as opposed to you dictating to the developer. There's nothing illegal about it. You share the parameters, they come back, and that's how they respond to the RFP. The reason, this is my opinion, why we didn't get any responses is because you put a limit, 3 to 5 acres. Once you start putting limits, then the city owns the risk. You're trying to make this as least risky to the city, and the developer actually carries the risk. So a couple other suggestions. Why can't you sell it for $1? And this is a question for Claire, but could you take the $900K and apply it to this project and then repay that by selling off the property on St. John? So you're taking the $900K, applying it towards this project, and then selling off St. John to recoup that $900K. I don't know, just a suggestion. In my opinion, and to support Councilman Hagan, I believe that the hybrid approach works best. The hybrid approach being you have a certain number of units as being market rate, you have a certain number of units being attainable, and then you have a certain number of units being the voucher program. Why are we limiting this to just $900,000? If ultimately the city controls the connection fees, the utility fees, that's another bone that you could throw to developers. Instead of doing a meeting with the seniors, I suggest that the winning developer perform what's called a design charrette with a group of seniors where the seniors were to go through the list with the developer, and they go through and figure out, okay, how do we want this place designed? That way, we're getting community involvement with the project. The seniors feel like they're part of the project. We're working together collaboratively. Design charrette is the term. With all due respect, I don't believe there is any way around prevailing wage. I do it for a living. It sucks, but it's reality of public construction in California. Last but certainly not least, Dominique just indicated that RHF said they needed 70-plus units. Irwin Village was only 48 on 4.5, 5 acres. So if you take that 48 or 50 units on 4.5, 5 acres, double that, 96 units, there's your sweet spot. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else like to come up and speak? See hands out there, you want to talk? Any more ideas?
We do have people on the line as well.
Okay, and then we'll entertain those on the line at this point. Would you like to give us your name, please, and add your comment?
Is there anyone via go-to that would like to speak or make public comment? It's not.
Come on up, Mr. Haskin.
Gary Haskin, I need some clarification. If we go to this multi-mix unit and we have the low and the very low, are we back in the same boat with Section 8? Question.
So if for the mixed hybrid, if you have units that are affordable, I mean, depending on what the project is, if it's with RHF, yes, they wanted to use
Are
the
we
voucher
back in
base.
Section 8?
A portion of them.
Section 8, no guarantees that Escalon seniors can get in because they're going to be low on the list of getting a place. So we're going to have all those I can see being filled with out-of-city people who are more low, been on that list longer. It's sort of like we've missed the point. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Ann, please come up to the podium.
I'm Ann Shaddix, and I tried to get more information, but apparently there's a process called Certificate of Preference that we can file for, and that gives a certain percentage to S that you have to go through. It's pretty easy to get it approved because they're looking for senior housing developments to be done. So I have contacted the county to get a copy of the information. I haven't gotten a response from them yet, but I think there is hope out there that we could restrict a certain percentage for Escalon.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you for looking into that. Is there anyone else out there who would love to come up with some sort of feedback? Any ideas? Please come up.
On the issue of Section 8,
Yes.
it changed its name, but we will continue to call it Section 8. And the voucher program, although the pot of money is basically the same, it runs a little different, okay? I have renters who, myself as a property manager, who are on Section 8, okay? But as a private, landlords, apartment complexes here in town have Section 8 people in them, et cetera, we have the right to pick and choose who goes into them. Just like anybody else. I got 10 applications. You don't discriminate for Section 8, but I pick the people who obviously meet the qualifications to rent that property from me. Whether they use Section 8 or not to help meet that rent, doesn't matter. I'm picking the people. Irwin was a county program. Private ability to pick does not exist. They have to go off the San Joaquin waiting list. Heritage House and Irwin were not the same animals, even though some of their funding sources came from the same pot. They are run as different animals, okay? And I think that's where people are mixing them up. So you go out in Baker Street apartments, okay? There's a very high percentage of Section 8 there. We won't discuss how many, that's no one's business, but there's a very high percentage of Section 8 people there. That's okay. That's a private apartment complex. They get to accept whoever they want, and it's their liability who they accept and whether that works out for them or not. Doesn't matter if they have a bunch of Section 8. That's like Heritage House. It's a private developer, private company that holds it. They get to pick and choose, et cetera. Irving was a county project. Same thing as the one in Manteca, county. County is subject to the waiting list. That is the one that overrides everything and everyone else. So I think that's where the mix-up is, because I've heard this from a lot of people. Well, it's the same thing. Why can't we have this and this? Not the same animal, same funding pot, not the same animal, not subject to the same rules.
Different criteria.
Yeah. So I think that's where we gotta get away from them being the same. Same funding, different animal, different process. We want something like Heritage House. It's okay to have Section 8 in there, as long as the local, whoever owns it, whoever does it, has control over who gets in. Not that we're gonna discriminate, but simply because you don't want that county waiting list, which is years in the waiting, who have just about everybody on that waiting list that can't rent normally, bad credit, criminal backgrounds, let's face it, the pedophiles, all the people nobody want are the ones that end up on that waiting list the longest, because guess what? Nobody else wants to rent to them, okay? So we need to clarify the difference in those programs when we're discussing, you know, our potential to have some Section 8 people in, that's fine, as long as we're doing it Heritage House's way, so.
Thank you, Elsa. Regardless of what we pick in the ultimate findings and down, we will scrutinize it very much. It will never be a situation where it will get to the point it's ready to go and we don't know what's going on. We will fine tooth whatever project we do so everyone's comfortable with what we're doing from the very beginning. It won't be a surprise in the middle or at the end. It'll be from the beginning all the way through, transparency, so everyone's comfortable, so when we do it, everybody's on board and we'll move forward. Is there anyone else out there who'd like to add something this evening? Okay, is anyone online that would like to add anything? Or on the phones? Ann, would you like to add anything?
Yes, a very good point about Section 8. I have heard that projects, private projects that have, for affordable housing, they're so in demand, there's so much demand that they get the absolute best tenants, whether they're Section 8 or not. So that's one thing.
Yep.
The other thing is, you know, if you're gonna have a local preference program, it could be that the county has one, you know, based on what Ms. Shattuck said. But if the city wanted to have a local preference program, it might be useful to have a consultant find out what income level the seniors in Escalon are at.
I think we know that, don't we? Don't we have demographics already done on this?
I wouldn't say on there, we have how many
General
are in
income.
town,
We have general income of the community, correct?
median household income.
Okay, that's all.
But yeah,
Nothing else.
not specific to
Yeah, like
seniors,
if
no.
you found out all the people who are on the waiting list for a Heritage House, for example, you know, would they fall into the moderate income category?
I don't know.
I mean, it might be helpful for you to know that in advance, because then if you wanted to have an affordable component and you were willing, okay, you know, this is what our people, you know, they would qualify for that, or even low income, you know, it might help your decision-making.
It very well could. You know, the only issue I would have with all that, and it's gonna be 40 grand to get a consultant to tell us that. That's the bummer. Okay, thank you for that. Dominique, you wanna add anything?
No, we're just right back to those items that were brought up at the last meeting, which was size of land, maximum amount of funding that the city would be open to putting towards the project, and then adding anything else that the city or this council is interested in adding into that RFP to put it back
Okay,
out.
so we currently have an RFP?
This is the current RFP that's on there. This was the one that was presented that we did not receive any proposals on. And so I highlighted the area where we limited it basically to up to 5 acres.
Okay,
looking at potentially 3 to 5.
Okay.
So this is what was presented at our last meeting from both Mayor Pro Tem Swift and Councilmember Crumick regarding, these are the areas that were presented to us from developers, that the main areas was the land, not having to buy the land, not having to purchase the land, and then the money, whether it be discounts or reductions in fees and/or money to help construct the project. And so
what we need is a template. We need something that we can send out showing what we're willing to do in order to have interest come our way for this project. Now, the question is, based on this, obviously it didn't fly. So what is it, council, that you think we might add to this? Vice Mayor Swift?
Well, I have no problem. It sounds like we really want to steer this towards a privately management development. And that means that they've got to have a different blend of housing, which includes maybe some more moderates to help minimize any chance of, a lot of, affordable or a lot of tax credit needed housing. I don't mind going up to 9 or 10 acres. Not like, again, to Mr. Stroman's point, not to exceed 10 acres. And I think Councilmember Cronk was looking at 9. I don't mind going 10. Regarding the fee credits, again, without knowing the fiscal impact, I know it's going to impact us fiscally if we offered a possible complete waiving of the fee credits. I would again ask Mr. Stroman how typically that appears in an RFP so we get our language correct. But yeah, 10 acres. Waive fee credits. I think the notion about having the renderings, meeting with the seniors and that powwow, with the seniors like that, I think is an excellent idea to that third point. And then possibly the other point, again, other flexibilities. I don't know if we need to include language regarding a possible certificate of preference or, researching that a little more, because I think that'd be an excellent point too.
Yeah.
Basically trying to steer this entire project towards something like the RHS model to attract them or somebody like them. So that, so those 4 points, 10 acres, waive free credits, meetings with the seniors, once the developer's selected, and then any other flexibilities do you think we need to do that a developer would be looking at to steer things towards a more of a private development? Those 4 points.
Okay. Councilman Bellinger?
I agree that we're going to have to do some sort of a hybrid to get the credits from the state and everything to get a project going. I like the idea of a hybrid. Has the state or the county done any hybrid projects? By going to requiring a hybrid approach, does that then take the county/state out of the running for any project? And that means it's only going to be a private development, so then we can assure we don't have the Section 8 issue versus the Heritage House issue. Is that a way around that? Because I don't think the state's involved with market rate renting or attainable renting per se. So I think we need to look into that, because that, by saying we want a hybrid approach, that might just keep that out of there.
So it was my understanding from who I was speaking with RHF, that this is a relatively new criteria that was established by the state. Originally, it was where your projects had to be, 100% affordable. It was my understanding in either 2019 or 2020 that they okayed the application of projects that were mixed with different types of affordability within them, or pricing, so long as you didn't exceed a certain percentage of market rate. Yeah, and so he had brought that up. This is something that's new. It just got approved in the last few years. We haven't done it before, but we would definitely be willing to do it, to see this project move forward, because that's their mission is to provide affordable housing, for seniors. And
Right.
so they're looking more at that portion that's going to be affordable. They want to help us with the attainable, but they know in order to fund that attainable, they're going to have that portion of market rate to help with that. And so that was where they were willing to explore that option with us. But that's also where we fell into that funding gap where there was a funding gap of $1.7 million where, we would need this amount of money to move forward with the project.
Okay. Mr. Haskin, you wanted to add something?
When you're talking 10 acres, how many units are you talking here? Are we talking 50, 75, 100 units on 10 acres? Because if you're talking affordable and below market, you're sure not going to have a 6,000 square foot lot. You may not want that for a senior development to start with, but what's the ratio going to be? You're going to have 40 market rate homes for 10 senior houses? Waive all the fees for the entire project? You're talking a whole lot of giveaways for a very small return. So I think the size of that project is going to be crucial. And like I said, with 10 acres, you could probably put 100 units on it with the parameters for senior living. So we're giving a lot away to the market value or market side of it to attain just a small portion of the affordables. That's something to keep in
All
mind.
right, Mr. Drummond, just a moment. That's a good point. I was going to say something, I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. All right, Mr. Drummond, go ahead. Gary, thank you.
I'm not answering Mr. Haskin's question for him, but back to my earlier point, you don't want to put those limits. Let the developer tell you that. So you come up with the land, you come up with the fees, then let the developer come back and say, okay, I can do 20 market rate, I can do 45, I can do attainable, and then the rest be under the voucher program. Let them tell you that information. Don't you dictate that to them. One other quick question. This is just a procedural question. So Dominique, if this goes out, and somebody calls you and asks questions, how is that information shared with them?
So what we do is as a part of this RFQ or RFP, we tell them about a software that we use on our website, and that's where we publish all of our bids and stuff. It's called Public Purchase.
Right.
And so it's listed in the RFP that if you go to this, you join Public Purchase, which is our e-procurement system.
Okay.
And it gives you, access to bid, and it's a free service. You log in, create an account. And so essentially, if somebody submits a question, we'll either post it in there or they'll submit it through that software. And then when we provide that response, we provide it through the software. So everybody that has signed up, reviewed the project, or has an account and has basically said, we've looked at this project,
Right.
would get the answer to it. So back when we put the project out, within the first 2 to 3 weeks, we had at least over 100 companies review the RFP because it notifies us when somebody downloads it or reads it. But it just wasn't something that anybody responded to without, we had a few sales things. Oh, when the project builds, let me know if you need something like this, we can put in your HVACs and random things like that. We didn't have any specific questions where people were asking anything about the document. And so that was kind of unusual in the aspect where we put out a bid and we usually route several questions, and then we have to issue some type of addendum or provide some type of response to everybody.
Well, I guess that was my point, is that, if you come to a decision on these parameters tonight, and it gets floated out there and people are having questions, then probably what I would suggest is, for the sake of transparency, if these questions are coming up, it might behoove staff to, when you guys are in closed session, or even make an agenda item to go over the questions that developers are talking about, the questions, so that it's open to the public. The public knows what's going on. And I'm probably completely way overstepping my bounds here, but this project needs a champion. And I do this for a living. And so whatever I can do to help city staff, whatever I can do to help you as our city council, I'm willing to do it. Because former Councilman Fox has been talking about this issue since 2004. And quite frankly, I'm tired of just talking about it. It's time to start doing it.
All right, go ahead, come up, please. Okay, Ann, come on up. If you want to come up, do it.
First of all, I just comment that I'm impressed with what Sean is recommending, and I hope you'll take that seriously. But there's another thing that's just frustrating me. You know, we talk about Section 8, I'm not so sure we know what it means. We talk about low income, I'm not so sure what it means. Why can't we get a clear explanation from our legal counsel or from someone that said, if you're going to build a private, you can build so many low incomes. Where does Section 8 come into it? I just feel like we're bobbing back and forth talking about something that none of us have a clear explanation as to what it means and what it means for this project.
Well, and I think what's important is we first have to establish what it is we're trying to do, okay? We all have a general concept. The general concept is we'd like to have affordable, attainable housing for the seniors. Absolutely, yes.
Right.
But it's a little more complex than that, because if you deal with the issue you just brought up, which is the Section 8 issue, we don't know, it depends on the model we use. If a particular model may request us to have a voucher program, it may not. It may suggest that, you know, I'm not sure what's going on because we don't know what our real model is going to be yet. And that's tonight, hopefully, the suggestions have been made. And I believe staff will write up another RFQ. Am I correct?
Correct.
And they
If
will.
that's your direction.
That's right. And they will put it out there again, and we're going to wait to see what kind of feedback we get. It's a tough process. It's not something that we can just ramrod. I wish it was.
No, I'm not asking for ramrod. I'm just asking for clear
clarity.
explanation
Sure.
between the Section 8 affordable housing. Does Section 8 even apply to this project?
Yeah.
We need to get some answers on that because we all have different ideas.
True, this is true.
And I'm not sure who's right.
But the point is, if we can tonight come up with a plan and submit it, we'll get the information based on that plan, okay? Once we establish what we think we want to do, it goes out, it'll get looked at, and then we'll have a model, and then we'll know how to apply those questions you've asked to that particular model. Because every model is different.
Okay.
In this particular case, we don't know yet because we're still working on that model this evening. But once we get that model, I believe it'll go out, we'll have debate on it, and boom, we'll be able to move forward.
Developers will come to us with an idea of what they want to do to make it work for them. They'll say, we need X number of this, this, and this. We need this much land and this much revenue from your in lieu of funds, and we can make this project fly. Different developers will have different ideas of what that is. At that point, we evaluate, hopefully with more than one.
All right,
I'm encouraged with that recommendation.
thank you.
Yeah, and you guys have all done a good job of explaining the low-income portion. Just to go back a little bit further, the reason that the low-income or affordability portion has come up is because a lot of the developers that specialize in senior housing get their money from the federal and state in the form of tax credits. And so when they apply for those tax credit programs, that subjects them to the requirements of the state and federal government, which want them to build affordable housing in accordance with their guidelines, because it's our money that we're giving you. We're giving you this money to fund the project and keep the project going. And so this is what we want, 100% affordable. And so that's where it's come, where like RHF specializes in affordable housing, and so they don't do projects where they typically don't apply for tax credits, because that's what subsidizes construction, subsidizes all their projects, and gives them that equity and basically asset to move forward with other projects, because it's all a big financial put together. And so that's where that's originally stemming from. There could be somebody out there that's willing to do the project, and maybe it is. I mean, originally when we were looking at doing something like this, we were looking at, 25 to 35 units, which is still in this proposal. We're only looking for 25 to 35 units of attainable housing. But a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but the developers that have kind of stuck through and hung in and continue to talk to us are always looking at something larger, because that attainable doesn't pencil out for them long, in perpetuity, longevity. You know, yeah, we could cover it for a certain amount to get the project constructed, but eventually, depending on the market constraints and things, the market could go up, the market could go down, and here I am with these they're gonna, you know, would essentially be deed restricted units because we would define to them what's attainable and restrict those units to make sure it protects that class of seniors we're looking for. But if anything happens with the market, that could affect them. And so that's why a lot of these developers, in my understanding, refer to the voucher program, even if they don't end up utilizing it because it's backup. If I could get vouchers for this project, even if I'm not using all of them, 40 or 50 of them, even if I only end up using 25, if that project is restricted to where I can only charge them $1,000 because of that restriction, but the market goes up and it's $1,600 for that unit and I'm losing out on that $1,600, I can apply the voucher to that unit and I'm whole again, whereas before I'm in the whole $600. And so that's how it's been utilized. Not to say that somebody can't move forward and not even have affordable housing be included as the project. We just haven't been seeing that. And it's my understanding that a lot of things are playing into that. It's not only, you know, our state's rules and regulations for housing, their, you know, affordable housing crisis and the need for expediting housing and building new housing and increasing housing production. It's also the construction costs, recently more of inflation, COVID and everything that's coming in equipment-wise. And so these are all factors. When we were looking at this a year ago, I mean, it's gotten, I wouldn't say worse, I don't want to use that word, but it hasn't gotten better either construction-wise and for materials and such. So that's where the low income comes from. It doesn't have to be a part of this, but it's been presented to us from other developers who specialize because that's the program they usually utilize to move forward with projects.
Okay, so at this point, you've had some recommendations from council. You have an RFP currently in front of you. What changes will you be making?
So it's my understanding you were not to exceed 10. Is that in agreement with the council that we update that from 3 to 5 acre portion?
The only thing I think we have to recognize, if you do that, that's going to change the dynamics of the future lease that you hope to ever have out there too, you know that.
Yeah, and we would have to
You're going to have to deal with that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's all.
What would the timeline be, do you think?
For this?
Yeah.
I mean, if we could get everything situated and move forward, I mean, if all of our ducks were in alignment, I mean, maybe we could get it done in the next year or so.
Yeah.
Like approval of the project and moving forward. I don't think it would move that quickly. We haven't really seen many things move that quick, and so we're
Right,
looking at 2 to 3
I'm
years.
just wondering how we're going to have to draft the other thing you and I discussed today. That's another problem we're going to have to
Yeah,
deal
so
with.
that would be affected.
So that's going to have to be looked at too.
Yeah, and so that would all have to be taken into consideration. And then, in the past, I think we put this out for 60 days. I don't know if you want me to put it out for the full 60 days or just put it out for the 30 days.
Well, I don't know. I think, is it, in your experience, the 60 days too much or not enough, or how do you feel about it?
I think 30 days is enough. I mean,
could
it's.
try that.
People are building, and so I don't think it's an issue. And I think if people said it wasn't enough time and they were actually applying for it, they would indicate we need more time, and we could always extend it.
Okay.
If I'm getting activity and people are asking me questions and stuff, and I know that people are working on things, we could extend it as a whole.
That's fine. The only
Yeah.
thing I would suggest is that we're kept abreast of it constantly. Where
Sure,
I want to
yeah.
know where we're at from every moment something happens.
Yeah, the only thing that happens with bids is everybody submits them on the last day.
That's
It's
always-
usually
that's
what I
always
get.
the case.
Nobody submits anything early,
Well, that's the
so.
world we live in.
Yeah, and that's just the way it is,
All right,
yeah.
let me recognize someone in the audience. Go ahead,
Sure.
Peggy.
What you hear. What Ann said about having seniors give their input later on, once you have an interested developer, that's a really good idea, and they can talk about the amenities that they want. But as far as just the project in general, do you really have like a clear vision as to what kind of a project? Because Gary was referring to, it almost seemed like, do you foresee this looking like Heritage House, like fourplexes? Or do you see it more as like a 2-story senior living like Samaritan Village in Houston. If any of you went to visit the place in Manteca, which is the
Cottage.
the developers, yeah. And I mean, if any of you went over there, you would see that it was a beautiful, absolutely beautiful facility that was really amazing. So I think as a council, do you all even have like a clear vision of what you're even thinking about, so that once you get a developer that's interested, do you even know, are you all on the same page as to what?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't have a clear view of it, and I don't think anyone does. I think it's gonna depend on a lot of different things, in terms of how many units are built,
Right,
the developer and how he wants to do it. I mean, so it's, to be honest with you, I don't.
because it seems like maybe you should have some kind of a,
It's kind of hard to come
Some
up with
kind of-
right now.
you know, just so that.
I'd like to see what options are out there on the table, as far as what's coming back. I think that's what Sean was alluding to as far as the exceeding, language and seeing, because there's your like ideal world answer, yeah. Like RHS over there, the Heritage House looks real, that's been running really
Yeah,
well. My
it
office is
works,
right
yeah.
next to it. I've never had an issue with them. They
Right.
do a great job there. But reality, I think, is like what's on the table, versus what you want on the table is,
Right.
I think, what we have to look at.
So you might even want to just visit a few of these places. They just built a new one in Oakdale, the one in Houston, the one in Manteca, just to kind of get an idea about when developers come back, that you have an idea of what you think is.
Okay, hang on.
neat.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. Councilman Swift.
No, and again, to answer Peggy's question, I mean, at least personally, I mean, the way, if I were a betting man, I think that ideally we're probably looking at something along what Ms. Sandoval was talking about, privately ran, so that we don't get into the state or the county voucher program. Okay, that version of Section 8, and by the way, I think you did a very good job explaining the difference between the two voucher programs. I think it is going to be a hybrid, because I don't see how a developer would not be able to have a number of market rates in order to also have the low-income program. And I think you did, Dominique, you did a very good job of explaining why a lot of these developers are going to be going for the vouchers anyway. And I think that's realistically probably what's going to happen, because there's going to need to be a balance. If we want to keep it private, if we want to keep Escalon, any kind of way that we can get a preference to Escalon citizens, then I think those are probably going to be some of the compromises we're going to have to make. We're going to see we're going to see some market rate, maybe more than maybe a couple of us are going to feel comfortable about. It could be a project done in 7 acres. Again, to Mr. Stroman's point, I think you're right. That's why I would say not to exceed 10 acres. Okay, so that's realistically what I think we're going to be looking at down the road.
Hang on, just take it easy. Okay. Elsa.
As you know, I left social services now almost 8 years ago. Twice, my boss, who is a developer or works with developers, brought 2 different senior-specific housing projects to Escalon, and they did not pencil out. Okay, we already know that because they were too small. One was Ramus and one was Spivak, who built those really beautiful ones in Riverbank when you go down. Beautiful, okay, that's Spivak. Okay, the issue with developers is the penciling out. The smaller 40 units, 30, 40 units, never works out for them. This is why the state started approving mixed units. They recognized we have a problem. The mixed unit development is specifically to address that problem, to make it profitable for a developer to say, okay, we can meet the low income if we mix it this way. That is why that's why it's allowed now, basically. So yes, you need to clarify that. Go to these developers, put it out there, and hopefully you can bring someone like Spivak back to the table, because now you're talking enough units for them to go, yeah, we can absorb that low income with the rest. Spivak's a really nice gentleman. I would suggest you reach out to him, since he's done those beautiful ones in Riverbank. They go with the private because, again, back to the 2 animals, private allows you don't have to worry about a preferential program. You got private money deciding who gets in. You can't discriminate no matter what. You cannot give Escalon people preference without having someone hit you with the discrimination. okay? You just have to look at people as a blank slate. Who is my best renter? Who do I know is gonna be successful? And when I mean successful, means they can afford to rent it. I'm not gonna have to worry about them not paying their rent. I'm not gonna have to worry about things being grown in there that shouldn't be grown in there. I don't have to worry about this and all these other issues that property managers have to deal with. But that's where you come in with, keeping it private, because you have that freedom to pick who gets in there as a successful renter, as opposed to, the county saying, this is what you get. Okay, so again, put it together. And as I told you before, don't tell my boss, but I will gladly give you the contacts of these people, and I will gladly put you together with them. I'm the one that put the project together for him. This is what he did for a living for Bank of Stockton for 42 years. He was the VP of Bank of Stockton. He obviously is retired now. And he ran all the development in the valley. He never did a loan that was under $5 million. Everybody who has any stake in the valley went through him. That was his thing. When he retired, went golfing for a year, decided, I'm bored now. And he was trying to do something for Escalon. He was born and raised right here in Escalon. Pictures of his family are over there at that historical museum. It just wouldn't pencil out. Just didn't
Also,
pencil out.
maybe you could submit a list to staff of those potential developers who might play well for us,
Okay.
if you would.
Is that Spivak?
Spivak?
He was on the line earlier. I did invite him. Yeah, I've worked with him in the past, so he was invited, and I invited Bob Ramus, because that was who I had in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, so I did include them because I have talked to him over the years.
Good enough.
Yeah, he was originally looking at multifamily up the road here behind Dollar General.
Okay.
But they were looking at, they had access issues there with Dollar General. Something wasn't recorded the way they wanted it recorded with that property owner, and they wouldn't give them fire access. So the fire department was having issues there. And then they still have this lot up here on McHenry and Countrywood.
Right.
I think it's the last property they have
How much
left
land
in
is
town.
that? How many acres is that?
I think it's 3.
3.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's
right under
Spivak's
3.
property?
That's Spivak's property. That's their last one that's vacant in town.
Okay, thank you. All right, Elsa, thank you. Mr. Strollman?
I know I have a reputation that I talk a lot, but one other thing that I would strongly suggest is when you release the RFP, your legal counsel can clarify this, but I believe under public contract code, you also have to advertise how you're going to evaluate the proposals. Because if a developer knows how they're going to be evaluated, that's how they will write their proposals to you. If you don't list out how you're going to evaluate the proposals, now you're opening up the city to some sort of risk where you like this developer, but you don't like this developer. Now you're in the middle of a legal battle over 2 developers. And so I would strongly recommend not only including this information, but the evaluation criteria also as part of the RFP.
Thank you. Staff, you may take that under advisement.
Yes, I just pulled up our selection process, and so we've got that in the RFP as well. The only part that would have come up was anything else that council wanted to update. So we have our development team characteristic where it's like quality and completeness of the information, evaluation of past projects, because we do ask them to provide any past projects they've done, I believe in the last 10 years. It might be 5, I'll have to look back on it. Experience in conceiving or successfully implementing and managing affordable or senior residential development projects, ability to provide necessary resources, experience, and capability to assure timely implementation and completion of the project. Then we also listed development goals, and these were the following items that were approved by council, and that's where we had, as project targets, the deed restriction 67 plus, 24-hour property management for daily on-site operations, facility to be gated with keypad or passcode entry, pre-rental of units to give Escalon residents priority preferences. And so we titled that a, Escalon-based renters program. And then we went into rental units, and these were the sizes and number of units that we were looking at that time. this is essentially what we were looking for in the project. And so these may be items that you might want to reevaluate, update, and/or remove completely if we're wanting to, improve flexibility. But we had, where the city or council was looking at 25 to 35 attainable units, and then we emphasized that that's for those with annual incomes between the 42 and 50,000, and so that would put your estimated rent between the 800 and 1,100, and then any market rate units, developer to determine that we were open to attainable as well as market rate. And then we had sizes of units: studio 600 feet, 1 bedroom 700 square feet, 2 bedrooms 900 to 1,000 square feet. Necessary amenities, which included walk-in shower, stackable wash and dryer in each unit, security system or a call system in room for emergency notifications, HVAC.
Dominique, I have a
Yes.
question for you.
Sure.
This is a senior project idea, and if we went into building more units, let's suppose you went up to 60 or 70, would we have that capacity here of those who would fill that, or would we have a vacancy situation where it wasn't filled by our locals and they would open up for outside? And the other question is, could at that time we have some of those units made for younger people at the same time? Because if we had this project built, is it gonna be locked into 67 or older no matter what? Or are we,
That's at our discretion. I mean, if we're the ones that
well,
are
here's what I'm
putting-
afraid of. I'm afraid of that we're not gonna have 60 people that are gonna need these. But we do have other people in this town, young people, that are looking for places to live. So I'm just wondering if we could do that without creating a bigger problem, because I know you're gonna have, I don't see 60 people in this town looking for a place to live right now.
Yeah, that's our requirement or
Our discretion.
restriction that we're wanting to put on there. So at any point in time, if we felt that it was infeasible or we're not able to get renters, that's something that we could adjust
open it
later
up.
on. Yeah.
Okay, I
Open
just
it up
wanted
and
to know, yeah.
readjust. It's a process.
Yeah.
Because you're essentially deed restricting it, and so we would have to go back and change the deed restriction and then apply it to all the, to the.
But do you see what I'm thinking?
Yeah, if maybe you were able to situate it to where we give preference to 67 and up, and then if we're unable to find that
Exactly,
age
that's
group,
my
drop it
point.
down to 62, and if
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
unable to
and I-
find that, drop it down to
exactly,
55.
exactly.
And that's how you give your seniors preferential.
That's exactly my point.
Maybe, and then
Yeah.
at that point, if you don't have anybody, you're mixing in.
I would say drop it to 62 now.
Okay, just a minute.
I think Ann might know how many seniors are out there.
Okay. Ann, excuse me, do you have any idea approximately how many seniors we have in the community that may be interested in housing themselves here in the new project if we did build it?
What does it say?
Okay.
The chart is newer and this is outdated, so I'll have to update all that information.
But I'm referring to Escalonians at this point. Okay, good enough. It was a good question. All right, Councilman Bell, do you have something?
Last I heard, there was over 100 people currently on the wait list at Heritage.
At Heritage.
At Heritage, so that goes a long way right there. With filling another, at that income level, the low income. I would say we move the 67 down to 62. There's no reason to be at 67. That's exorbitantly high in my opinion. People are looking to get out, and 62 would be more manageable. I would not go any lower than that for a project. Nobody needs young people next door
Yeah, this
to the
one is being
seniors.
updated.
That's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
We can't do that. I'm hard fast on that. I won't, go for that at all. I don't think any senior in this city is gonna go for that.
Okay, let's get grouped up here.
They'd rather have somebody from another town come in as a senior than put someone who's 27 in there that doesn't have enough money to buy.
All right. So, Ann, not Ann, but, yeah, I guess it would be Ann. Ann, so if we were going to move from this point on, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have the RFP figured out this evening. We'll put it out. It'll come back in 30 days, hopefully with some sort of feedback from those interested, correct? That's how this works? Okay. So, we had some suggestions Councilman Swift made, and those seem to be acceptable amongst the council. So those will go into the RFP, I assume.
So that was the not to exceed 10 acres?
Not to exceed 10 acres, the waiving of the fees.
Are we gonna wait? I wanna make sure I'm clear on this. You wanna waive fees and give up in lieu of fees? I just wanna clarify, because I'm not sure I'm on board with giving up fees either. They're
It's a tough
stuck.
one.
We can't get away with the school board. That's not our fee to give, unless we
Oh,
cover it
that's
for
right.
them.
Yeah.
They will not
city
get rid of
fees.
it.
Their limit is 35, so I think it has to have 35 or more units.
We'll have more than
Pay
that.
that fee, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we need to give more than the in lieu of fees and the acreage, myself.
Okay.
You know what we could do? We could stop at that and see what happens.
Yeah, we can.
We could put
Okay.
it into the RFP as something that we're offering, subject to type consideration, subject to the type of project. And then when you have a better idea of what they're presenting, we could figure out where it would be applied, or where it
How
would
much
not be
more
able to be
that would be
applied.
needed.
Yeah, and what you may have to change to modify for the project.
But Dominique, based on what we've come up with this evening, do you have enough to put out an RFQ?
So I just wanted to go back to letter I, which was that financial offer. And so this was to obtain this project that has the city's project targets. We would add language in here identifying that we have in lieu funds available up to $900,000 in potential fee credits that we could apply to the project.
To the extent that those are
Yeah.
low or moderate, whatever that
Meet
might
that
be.
Yes.
municipal code criteria, correct. And so we could update that in here. And then we had something in here for ground lease, because we are under the understanding that there are some companies out there that maybe don't want to take ownership and are fine with leasing the land for the projects. In perpetuity, 55 years, however long their loan is for construction and such. So we did offer that in there as well. And then if the purchase of the site was proposed, total purchase price offered for the site in terms of the sale. And then we would definitely, with council's blessing, add in that language requiring them to work with the seniors to make sure that the project
It
is.
would be like the
suitable for their
charrette,
needs.
we refer to as charrette, where they have to come and look at the.
Yeah, if you want me to put that in there, we
Put
can
it
have
in
that
there,
Please.
there.
put it in there,
Please.
because that's what's concerning them, let them have it.
Okay.
All right?
So we'd be looking at probably like rough renderings at this point as a proposal. And
Sure.
So they might not be as
Go ahead.
as project specific.
One question regarding the evaluation criteria, and that's, actually, there's a question to those who deal with RFPs, who write RFPs, and I'm looking at you guys as I'm talking. The area under rentals, okay, where we get into the weeds a little bit with, specific rental sizes, stuff like that. Is that beneficial at this point to a developer, or is that snag things with the developer at this point? The aspect where they talk about the size of units, studios got to be 600 square feet, one bedroom 700, two bedroom 900 to 1,000. It's got to have a walk-in shower, things like that. Does that help or hurt at this point?
I would say, you can give them a general idea of what you're looking for, but really it's up to them to come up with that nice
Okay.
plan as to what's gonna work.
So I could put language like open to studio, 1 and 2 bedrooms, but leave it blank where they could propose size and,
Yeah, I think so. You want to get their feedback.
yeah.
No
Get their
bigger
feedback.
than
All right.
1,000 feet for a two-bedroom or something, you don't want them building a house on there.
Yeah, okay.
All right,
Oh, no. Sean.
of course. Mr. Strollman, what do you got?
Is that
That's fine with me.
answer close enough? Right? Close
Yeah, that's
enough?
fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
We agree with that?
And are we going to lower it to 62 from 67?
I think
That's-
We should. I think we
Sounds like you have
should.
a consensus.
Okay, so we'll drop that down to 62.
What's retirement age now?
Depends on how much money you want out of Social
Depends where you
Security.
work, yeah.
It's when you're ready to retire.
Okay, that's not the answer I'm looking for.
minimum.
What is
So I
the
think
legal
that-
retirement age?
For social security,
Yes,
it depends on your birth date.
but isn't there an age?
Yeah, it
depends.
depends. Like for me, it's 66 and 4 months.
Okay.
'Cause I was born in 1956.
Okay,
If you were born before that, the age is younger.
so in
So it's
essence,
all, it just depends.
so you're gonna have rentals opened up to people that aren't retired, is what you're saying?
Yeah, and you don't, and if you don't retire, that's full retirement age. If you wait till you're 70, you get more social security. So,
Yeah, I'm just curious how this works. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that Social Security, if you're looking at an IRA, before we tax you different based on your age, or 62 is where you can tap into your IRA without getting killed by Uncle Sam.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's changing.
Yeah.
There's a proposal to make that an older age.
Yeah, Uncle Sam's
So you
trying to
don't
get you
have
any way
take
he
it
can.
Until you're older. You don't have to take it until you're older.
Or you and me, it's.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, we're gonna have to just die worshiping.
Like, don't worry about
Okay,
it.
just one more, guys. Go ahead, Councilman Hagan.
Hey, and just so I'm clear on the lease option to buy stuff like that, as long as it's at fair market value, that doesn't bring you into the
Right.
public
If you're
sphere.
not as long as you're not subsidizing the project in any way.
Okay. Would a time frame on option to buy be subsidizing?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that.
Okay.
Getting a full fair market value lease for the 99 years of the lease to spread it out enough to maybe make it work.
All right, so,
Potentially, we could
All
do
right.
something with that.
so now that we've got the perimeters, you can go ahead and hopefully draft something.
Yes.
Now,
so-
before you put it out, you will bring it back for us to look at it, please?
Sure, I
Thank
can bring
you.
it back on Monday's meeting.
Okay, and will we
Look
post
at
it
it.
online for those who would like to see it?
Is that okay to do, Dan? The draft?
Sorry.
Can we post the draft of this after we update it and put it on, or do we have to wait till council approval?
Well, we're just gonna
Well,
look.
it'll go up, it'll go out in the
Whatever
agenda.
you prefer.
Well, I'd like to everybody to see everything that goes on from this point on.
Okay.
I don't want any ambiguities, I don't want any non-transparency issues.
Okay.
All right, so let's keep it up in the
Post it on
public,
the
letting
website.
everybody see what's going on, so there's nobody feeling like they're not included or they weren't told.
Okay.
All right?
Sure.
Now, that pretty much concludes our meeting, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, unless there's anything else.
I don't.
You guys
see
want to
anything-
address?
No. All right, I'm
Okay.
gonna adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go.